Well, good day. I want to welcome you to our new course, Apologetics 6323, and this deals with apologetics in the context of Christian ministry. Now, that may sound like it's a book on pastoral ministry and how to make a case every now and then from the pulpit or in a private conversation at a restaurant with an unbeliever. And certainly that's apologetics. In fact, we're going to see in the course of this course that really everything that we do ought to be apologetics. That's one of the first things we're going to hit together in lecture number 1. But this course is a course intended to help us understand how apologetics can be involved in Christian ministry from a wide variety of angles. There are about 5 views, at least in one of our textbooks this time. We're going to look at a book called 5 Views on Apologetics. Some might argue for a few more. Some might argue that there are only 4. But I think that 5 is a pretty good number. Nice, not exactly a round number, but a nice number to deal with, half of 10. And it's something we can manage in a course like this over 8 weeks. So hopefully we're going to see how these apologetics texts that we're reading and some of the work that we'll be doing in this course will help us in the context of ministry. Now, the purpose of this overview lecture is to orient you to some of the textbooks, or actually to all the textbooks, plus I'm going to say a brief word about some supplemental reading. And then just talk about the course, what's expected of you, what I expect of myself, what hopefully you expect of me. And those are the things we want to talk about here together for the next few minutes. Let me say something, first of all, about textbooks. We're going to read this book first. Let me put it up here in front of my face for a moment. It's by Os Guinness. It's called Fool's Talk. I put it in front of my face. Someone once told me I had a wonderful face for radio, and I sort of identify with that comment. The Guinness book is really helpful. He is a longtime writer in the Christian world and has written an enormous amount of literature on various aspects of apologetics. He mentions in this book that this is his 40th book that he's written, which surprised me. I didn't know there were that many. I have an assortment of his other, many of his other books, not all of them obviously, but he is a very helpful author, very clear. I think one of the things you like most about this book is that it is written with such clarity and doesn't presume a lot of knowledge of apologetics or a philosophy, but it does inform along the way. And I love the way each chapter opens with a kind of interesting anecdote from history or literature or personal story out of his life or something like that, and how he relates that to the theme of the chapter. The sort of underlying premise of this book is one that I really appreciated the first time I read the book, and that is that the heart of apologetics is the apologetics of the heart. I like that. I like people who can turn a phrase in the way that Guinness does right there with that particular statement, and I think that he's right about that. The heart of apologetics is the apologetics of the heart. We have to appeal to people's hearts, and it has to come from our hearts. And so that's sort of the sub-theme that you'll find chapter after chapter in the Guinness book. And so that's the first one we're going to get into, the first few days of week number 1. Second textbook we're going to look at together is G.K. Chesterton's book, The Everlasting Man. I think I have a copy of it sitting nearby here, so let me show that to you as well. Now, the Chesterton book and one other book in the course, in the required reading, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, have come out in multiple different editions. And I'm not concerned that you necessarily get the edition that we're using here, since we're not making assignments by page numbers, but instead of by chapters. If you have an older edition or a different edition of Chesterton or of Lewis, feel free to use those. It's not a problem at all. These are not annotated texts, and so we're not looking for you to read annotated footnotes or anything else. But Chesterton, of course, is a key figure in 20th century apologetics from a British standpoint. Was at one time an Anglican, grew up Anglican, became a Roman Catholic. And so we're going to be reading at least this Catholic guy this semester. But Chesterton is one of those individuals whose work spills over denominational lines. I have a good friend that I taught with for a number of years at Boyce College who wrote his PhD dissertation on Chesterton. And so Chesterton has been a friend of Protestants as well as of Roman Catholics. Interesting book, devastating book in many ways. Looking forward to reading that. We're going to read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Now, this may be a book that you've read before. I've read it many times, but it's been a few years since I worked through it in any kind of a thorough way, aside from just to look up a reference or two here in a chapter or two. But I'm going to read it again along with you. It's one of those books that's very readable again, like Guinness's book, and a book that, of course, is one of those books for the ages. Lewis was a lot like Chesterton. They were both literary figures in England, prominent especially in the mid 20th century. Chesterton died earlier than Lewis. Lewis lived on into the 1960s. Interestingly, he died the same day John F. Kennedy was killed, was assassinated, and so dies in November of 1963. So we'll read Mere Christianity, a classic text. It's always good to reread the classic text in any discipline over and over again. We're going to look at the 5 Views on Apologetics, edited by a friend of mine, Steve Cowan, and we'll start on that this first week as well. It has 5 chapters, and the 5 chapters are written by very, very good and well-recognized proponents of these views on apologetics. Steve has, over the years, made a name for himself. He's recently co-written a book on philosophy with another fellow. He edited a book on church theory, the ministry of the church, the structures of the church a few years ago. He's written a number of essays and articles and reviews, and Steve's a good writer. Again, a friend. I've known him for nearly 20 years now. We're also going to read together the Cornelius Van Til book. This comes at the end, the Defense of the Faith. And one of the reasons that I've placed that book right at the end is because it's a pretty doggone hard book to read. And in fact, some of the questions we'll be looking at together we have to do with why is Van Til so hard to read. Now, we will have a supplemental book as well. And the supplemental reading, I really encourage you to read this, but I can't require you to read it. It's a book review on the Keller book. Make sure you take note of that as well. And this supplemental reading, I have 2 books actually, but this one takes most of the semester. I'm going to hold it up again in front of my face. There it is. Colin Brown, Philosophy and the Christian Faith. Now, Colin Brown has sort of faded from the scene. Most younger people reading newer philosophy and apologetics works may not recognize the name Colin Brown, but Colin wrote a number of works, again with a name like that you would expect. He is English, and he was. Wrote a big book on history of philosophy, or at least half of the history of philosophy. But this is his contribution, which he put out in the late 1960s. I think around 68 is when this book came out. And in this book, he gives us, in the space of about 300 pages, or a little less, a history of philosophy. And so for some people taking a course like this, perhaps apologetics really got you excited, and that's why you're in this program together. Perhaps it is the case that that you really want to be a good defender of the faith, but somewhere along the way you short-circuited yourself in terms of philosophical training. You may have had to take a course on intro to philosophy, but Kant came up in 30 minutes of a lecture, and Hegel was a bare memory if you could remember how to spell his name. On the other hand, some of you who are in this course may know a lot about philosophy, but I would recommend that both of you, both groups of you, and people in between, read this book. Very readable again. I've tried to pick except for Van Til, readable material for us to examine in this course. And it's a very good primer. So if you studied philosophy but didn't get, maybe it's been a while, and you didn't get as much as you needed, it's a good book. If you have a BA in philosophy, it's still a very helpful book. Now let me cover the other issues we'll be dealing with in terms of syllabus. There are quizzes every other week, so there'll be 3 quizzes and then a final. There's a forum each week. I promise to come back and respond to forum questions within just a couple of days after you post those questions. And any emails you send to me, I will reply to within a couple of days as well. There's one new thing this semester for me that was suggested by the powers that be, that is the man upstairs. I'm not sure where his office is, but Dr. Higgins made this recommendation, and that is we have some ungraded assignments. Now, these are not onerous. They are not anything that's going to take you hours to do. They are, to a certain degree, sort of thought experimentations. In some cases, I'll be asking you to look at a website and respond to 3 or 4 questions or write a paragraph. You'll email those to me once you get them done. There's a schedule for the book review about week 4, end of week 4, position paper at the end of the semester, and all of those things you can post right there online. At least at this point, unless I get instructions otherwise, I will have you send the ungraded material, as I've called it in the syllabus, directly to me. But it'll be short, probably occupy 20-30 minutes of your time most weeks. In some weeks, there's not even any of that assignment there. So that's basically the syllabus. That's the textbook list. And in the next lecture, we're going to get into the Os Guinness book.